Skelmersdale, there's no real connectivity if you don't have a car, which not everybody does. Younger people, older people don't necessarily have access to a car, and I do think this is a big enough place to have its own railway station. And I think if you look at the proposal for a railway station here in the centre of town, where the new regeneration, the new restaurants, the new cinema are going to go, the new big shop, you know, the supermarket's going to go, then it's clearly a boost to that scheme to have a railway station as well, because connectivity is what makes a difference to the success or failure of these things. And so I think it's a good proposal.
And I believe as well you've actually been out and about on the railways in West Lancs this morning. I mean, how have your experiences of that been?
Well, it was interesting at Ormskirk station to see the difference between the Merseyrail electrics with their 15-minute service whizzing you into Liverpool, and behind a buffer on the same line, though not electrified, a somewhat more trundling service only once every 90 minutes over the roughest bit of track I've ever travelled on, I think. But only a short space of distance between Ormskirk and Burscough, and then the Burscough curve, which if you were to reinstate it would give connectivity to Southport as well as to Preston. I mean, if I live in Ormskirk and I want to go to Southport now, I've got to go most of the way to Liverpool to get there. There's something deeply psychologically bad about heading so far in the wrong direction on a train before you can turn the way you want to go, and puts you off doing it. And I just think that kind of scheme is the kind of infrastructure investment scheme that the government keeps saying they're looking for. And connectivity and better transport links are a key driver to improved job opportunities, to improved educational opportunities, and to improved economic opportunities for a region like this. So it seems to me there's a lot those schemes could offer to West Lancashire generally, to Ormskirk and to Skelmersdale in particular. And I think Rosie's campaign to improve transport links, which she's leading on, is well worth supporting. And I know thousands of people are supporting it, signing the petition that she's got for the new railway station. But these kind of local schemes can be tremendously important in giving a big boost of regeneration to communities that have been excluded from improvement over the last period of time. So I think it's very positive.
And do you believe that for Skelmersdale to benefit from links to the railway network, do you believe it necessarily has to be in the town centre, or do you believe anywhere else in the town would that work, do you think?
Look, there's only any point in putting a railway station where people can get to it easily, and where people can then get from the railway station, because they'll be coming in as well as leaving, to what they want to do here. So I think you have to be careful about where you place something like a railway station. There's no point getting it wrong. And the key thing to my mind when you're thinking about these things is connectivity. Where are the people coming in wanting to go, and where are the people who are leaving from? So if you have to have a journey out to a railway station that's not in a convenient place, far fewer people will actually use it than if you put it in a place where people are and where they want to be. So, and I think there's a great opportunity to get it right here. And I hope that not only Rosie and the local council, but all the other agencies, whether it's Mersey Travel or whether it's Lancashire County Council, the Transport Authority, need to get together, work these things out, and then present a united front with the people who are signing petitions in their droves to Network Rail, to the government, to persuade them to do something about it, because this corner of West Lancashire has been left out for too long from these schemes that can make a real difference to people's lives and opportunities.
And what do you think the hurdles are, between now and actually getting the railway station in place?
Well, one of them is the government have decided to have a moratorium on local rail schemes, which isn't helpful. I think they need to be lobbied about that. But I think the biggest barrier is getting all the local players together to agree on what's wanted, and I think that kind of partnership working is tremendously important, because from the government point of view, if they hear local agencies all calling for the same thing in a properly worked out plan that's good value for money, that has good outcomes and impacts on regeneration and on opportunities, economic development, much more likely to listen to it than if everybody's talking about different things. So getting everybody together, I think, is tremendously important.
And one thing I'm sure people in West Lancashire will be saying, I mean, people in Skelmersdale have been asking for a railway station, you know, for many years. Labour, of course, were in government for 13 years. I mean, why were more efforts not made at the time to back a railway station into Skelmersdale?
Well, I think it's partly about how these things are asked for, you know, and I think there's been an issue in the past, which we're looking at in our policy review, about the London-centric decision-making on some of these things. And obviously, if you're a civil servant advising ministers in London, you're not necessarily going to have the Burscough curve at the top of your list of things to do. But if you're a local person living in West Lancs, then it's going to be higher up the list. Now, we're looking at devolving in our transport policy review, and we've not come to final conclusions yet, but we're very interested in devolving power, funding and responsibility for making decisions like this about local rail schemes, local road schemes, bringing this all together to transport authorities and partnerships of transport authorities. So here you would have Mersey Travel, who are keen on this kind of development, as I understand it, and also Lancashire County Council. And if you can have partnerships of transport authorities, and I, as Secretary of State after the next election, hopefully, will be able to say, look, I'm not making these decisions anymore. I'm going to send all the power and the money down to you. You decide between yourselves what the big local priorities are and focus on that. I think you'd be much more likely to have decisions made about things like this that would be favourable than my having a list of 395 schemes that I can okay the top 100 of, or whatever it is, you know. And so I think that kind of devolution is the way of the future, and it's certainly what our policy review is looking at doing.
And you mentioned as well about the railway network being very sort of London-centric. I mean, do you think that schemes such as the high-speed railway network, and do you think the Crossrail, I mean, do you think Skelmersdale and its railway station, do you think it suffered as a result of those policies?
I think that something like Crossrail's been tremendously important for London, and let me say, there's no point in building half of it. You know, you've got to do the whole thing. But I think that something like the Northern Hub, the Manchester Hub as it used to be known, that improves connectivity across the whole of the northern cities, arose out of the work that was done between the northern cities and our old regional development agencies, which have now unfortunately been abolished by the current government, has come up with a scheme that it would only cost £500 million in total to do, that would give huge connectivity gains, economic development gains and improvement across the whole of our northern cities. It's something that should be done, and in fact we were committed to doing that. The current government have okayed little bits of it, and they're doing it in bits and pieces, which is unfortunate. We would have done it all in this Parliament, and they're actually the Department for Transport has handed back £1 billion worth. They've cut £1 billion out of capital spending, which could have been used on this. They've handed £500 million back to the Treasury, which would have been enough to do the whole of the Northern Hub, and they've just given it back. So I mean, I think there is an issue about commitment to improvement. I think one of the things the current government has forgotten is the value in terms of economic development, jobs and growth, something we've been missing, of transport schemes. And I believe actually partnerships of transport authorities of the kind that I'm suggesting we should be devolving power and money to have a much better grasp locally of what would work and what would lead to those improvements. And so I hope that in future we'll see local communities, between all of themselves, taking much more responsibility and having much more authority and power, and money, by the way, because it wouldn't be spent from London, it'd be sent here to be spent locally, over what would work for them.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned at the start of our conversation about the regeneration of Skelmersdale. There are some very exciting things, you know, planned for the town centre. How much of catalyst do you think that is for the railway station campaign?
Well, it should be a big one, because I think anybody contemplating the potential improvements that are being looked at and that are going to go ahead ought to be able to see that having a railway station as a part of that would just boost the whole thing up. But there is no point anywhere having improvements and developments that people can't get to. You know, so that kind of connectivity that can't just be driven by car use, because young people can't afford cars, they can't afford to learn to drive, and they can't afford to run cars if they're not in work, for example. And older people perhaps have got past their car driving days, can't get around. You know, they need the public transport to be there in order to take advantage of the other opportunities. So these things go hand in hand, and the one ought to boost the other.